Right now, at this very moment, your thoughts are being shaped, your actions, your emotions, your beliefs, guided by invisible hands. And the worst part is, you think it's all you. You think you chose your morals, your goals, your desires. But Nietzsche warned us. Much of what you call freedom is just well-disguised control. The will to power, the deepest force in human life, doesn't only show up as domination. It hides behind love, behind morality, behind systems designed to make you safe and small. You are being moved by algorithms, by ideologies, by guilt, by approval. Until you see the strings, you are the puppet, and Nietzsche's hammer was made to break those strings. You wake up, you check your phone, you scroll, you react, you feel, and already you're not your own. You think you chose that feeling of guilt, that burst of ambition, that flash of shame, but in truth, you've been shaped, conditioned, nudged, not with violence, but with stories, with praise, with rules. This is the modern form of control, and Nietzsche saw it coming long before the digital age arrived. Control doesn't always come with chains. Often, it comes with compliments. It sounds like, be a good person. It looks like a raised eyebrow, a reward, a like, a disapproval, and it works, because the most effective prison is the one you don't know you're in. Control disguised as culture. You didn't choose most of what you believe. You absorbed it from your family, your church, your school, your screen, from stories that told you what a good life looks like, from heroes crafted by cultures that needed obedient citizens, not sovereign souls. You think your values are personal, but they're cultural. They were handed to you in subtle ways, morals dressed as truths, norms wrapped in love. Nietzsche would say, you are not moral, you are trained. The clothes you wear, the words you speak, the fears you carry, they're not all yours. They were chosen for you by forces that benefit when you don't resist. How ideologies become internal prisons. The most dangerous masters don't control your body, they control your thoughts. And once they're inside your mind, they don't need to monitor you. You monitor yourself. You think you're making your own decisions, but you're really following scripts. What you should do, what's right, what's normal, what's successful. You call it ethics. Nietzsche called it internalized power. Because ideology, once embedded, becomes self-regulation. You shame yourself, you censor yourself, you conform without a single command being spoken. And the cage is not made of bars, it's made of oughts, the soft power of good intentions. Not all control is cruel. In fact, the most effective control is often caring. They tell you what's best for you. They guide you for your own good. They correct you out of love. And so you obey, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. You don't even notice you've surrendered your autonomy because it felt so gentle. But Nietzsche was not fooled by this softness. He saw that behind many good intentions lies a will, not for your liberation, but for your compliance. The desire to make you safe is often the desire to make you predictable, to reduce your wildness, to shape you into someone manageable, and in the process, your spirit gets edited. Who benefits from your obedience? Whenever Nietzsche looked at morals, traditions, or systems, he asked one question: who does this serve? That's the question you've been trained not to ask. You're told, be kind, work hard, be humble, fit in. But why? Who profits from a kind, humble, obedient worker who never questions the structure? Control doesn't always look like tyranny. Sometimes it looks like routine, like polite silence, like a job you hate but are too scared to leave, like an identity you wear that was never really yours. And until you ask who benefits from my obedience, you will keep mistaking chains for character. When you hear the word power, you might imagine dominance, aggression, politics, force. But Nietzsche saw something far deeper. He believed that power is not about control over others. It is the inner force to express, to become, to shape the world in the image of your truth. It is the will that refuses to remain silent, passive, obedient. And yet, Most people spend their lives running from this force because it terrifies them, because it threatens to unmake the person they were trained to be. This chapter is about reclaiming what power really is and seeing how its denial has made you vulnerable to forces you pretend aren't shaping you. Nietzsche's true meaning behind the will to power. The will to power is not about domination. It is about life's drive to expand beyond limitation. It's the will that pushes a child to speak, an artist to create, a rebel to refuse. It is the force in you that says, I am not here to obey. I am here to become. But culture teaches you to suppress this will. It tells you ambition is ego, that confidence is arrogance, that taking up space is selfish, and so the will to power is buried, not destroyed. Buried, it leaks out in passive aggression, in addiction, in quiet rage, all because it wasn't allowed to speak directly. Nietzsche would ask, what would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for your power and started using it to create? The psychology of being ruled without noticing control today rarely looks like chains or commands. It looks like influence, like suggestions, like choices you believe are your own. You're told you're free. But Nietzsche knew freedom without awareness is just decorated submission. You buy what the market tells you to desire. You believe what the culture repeats enough times. You perform what others reward, and you call it authenticity. This is how the will to power is hijacked. You are not powerless. You are just being ruled in such subtle ways that your own will is no longer your own. To break free, you must begin to ask, who is making my decisions when I'm not paying attention, when submission becomes moralized? Obedience is not just demanded, it's moralized. You're told that to follow is good, that to submit is noble, that to question is arrogant. This is not accidental. It's a system built to defang the powerful, to make you feel guilty for wanting more, speaking louder, rising higher. Nietzsche would call this slave morality, a value system created by the weak to keep the strong in check, not with violence but with shame. And over time, you start to believe it. That your fire is a flaw, that your will is a sin, that your voice is too much. This is how your power is made quiet, with your own consent. How to spot masked power in modern life power. Today rarely looks like a tyrant. It looks like a helpful suggestion, a friendly correction, a smiling gatekeeper. It's in algorithms, in public opinion, in the quiet pressure to conform for your own good. And if you don't see it, it owns you. Nietzsche invites you to see differently, to look past the surface, to see power not just in its obvious forms, but in its subtle suggestions. He would ask, what am I pretending not to notice? Because noticing it would force me to change. That question is dangerous, because once you see the mask, you cannot unsee it. And once you feel your buried will to power, you cannot go back to sleep. You think morality is pure. You think it's about right and wrong, good and evil, justice and injustice. But Nietzsche would ask, whose morality are you living by? Who wrote those definitions? Morality, in his eyes, is not a divine code. It is a psychological weapon, shaped by the weak to restrain the strong, designed to protect the status quo, and internalized by you as if it were truth. And once you swallow it, you don't need chains. You'll police yourself. You'll call it being good. But Nietzsche saw it for what it is, a leash made of guilt, virtue, and fear. Guilt as an invisible leash. Guilt is not a sign of conscience. It's a sign of conditioning. You were taught to feel bad for wanting too much, to feel guilty for saying no, to feel selfish for putting yourself first. And so you obey, not because someone forces you, but because you punish yourself. Nietzsche would call this a sickness of the soul. Internalized control, a self-inflicted war between who you are and who you were told you must be. You think you're being virtuous, but often you're just trying not to feel guilty. The leash is in your mind now, and you tighten it every time you apologize for your own fire. When compassion is used to manipulate, compassion is sacred until it's used to control. You're told to be kind, to be patient, to forgive. But often, this is less about love and more about obedience. You're expected to forgive those who hurt you, to stay quiet to avoid hurting feelings, to make yourself smaller so others don't feel uncomfortable. This is not compassion. It's emotional blackmail, a way to keep you agreeable, harmless, manageable. Nietzsche saw this as a morality built by those who could not wield power, so they rewrote the rules to punish those who could. And if you don't see it, you will keep surrendering your strength in the name of kindness, the seduction of being a good person. What's more addictive than power? Being seen as good. You donate, you help, you agree, you nod, because it feels good to be admired, to be moral, to be right. But Nietzsche would whisper, is it virtue or vanity? Being good often means fitting a mold built by the culture to reward predictability. You're not being true. You're being rewarded for not making others uncomfortable. You've traded authenticity for acceptance, but the cost is your soul, because the need to be good can become the ultimate trap. A life lived not from will, but from fear of not being liked, rewriting your values from within. So what now? Nietzsche doesn't ask you to abandon all values. He asks you to create your own, to look at every belief you've inherited and ask, did I choose this, or was I trained into it? Does this make me more alive or more obedient? This is not easy. To rewrite your morality is to risk being misunderstood, to lose approval, to walk without a script, but it is also the beginning of freedom. You stop obeying guilt. You stop fearing disapproval. You begin to act, not to please but to create, not to conform but to express, not to be safe but to be real. This is what Nietzsche meant by the revaluation of all values. Not destruction, rebirth. Not rebellion for its own sake, but for your own becoming. You've lived inside a system of invisible wires, not built with laws but with emotions, not enforced by police but by culture, family, praise, fear. This is the control matrix, and escaping it doesn't begin with revolution. It begins with awareness. Nietzsche saw that the first step to freedom is not action, it's vision, the courage to see the systems that have shaped you, to notice how easily you're moved, to realize how deeply you've been trained to be harmless. You don't escape a prison by running, you escape it by realizing it was a prison at all, becoming immune to praise and blame. The matrix controls you not with force, but with feedback. A smile here, a scowl there, a subtle reward for conformity. You get addicted to praise. You adjust yourself to avoid blame, and little by little, you lose your shape. Nietzsche would call this the morality of the herd, a system that doesn't need to punish you because you've been trained to punish yourself. To escape, you must become immune to flattery and critique, not indifferent, but sovereign. You can hear the applause without needing it. You can hear the critique without crumbling. Because when your truth is no longer dependent on how others respond, you begin to govern yourself. Building awareness of subtle domination. Domination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in a tone that makes you doubt yourself, in expectations that feel normal, in guilt that feels like your own voice. But it isn't your voice, it's programming. Nietzsche invites you to look again at every decision you think you made freely, at every belief you've never questioned, at every role you play to be accepted. Who profits from you staying small? You won't see this unless you want to, because the truth is painful. It means the life you've built might not be yours, but it also means that life, real, wild, sovereign life, is finally possible. Developing inner resistance to manipulation. When you stop being led by guilt, praise, fear, what guides you? Nietzsche's answer: your own will, but that will must be trained, sharpened. It must learn to say no without guilt, to say yes without needing permission, to move with integrity even when you're misunderstood. This is resistance, not to others, but to your own reflexes, to the urge to please, to the habit of explaining, to the instinct to conform. Every time you resist the pull to self-abandon, you grow stronger. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. You become a person who cannot be quietly rewritten, reclaiming thought, desire, and action as your own. Your mind was not meant to be outsourced. Your desires were not meant to be installed by algorithms. Your actions were not meant to be guided by unspoken rules. Nietzsche's final invitation in this escape is radical authorship, to reclaim your mind, to own your wants, to live from a place that is not reactive but generative. What do you think when no one's watching? What do you desire when guilt is gone? What do you choose when no one else is choosing for you? These are not easy questions, but they are the ones that tear down the matrix from the inside, because the only person who can give you your life back is you. You've seen the game now. You've felt the strings. You've realized how many of your choices were shaped by forces you never named. But awareness is not the end, it is the beginning. Because freedom is not just about escaping control, it is about stepping into authorship, about using your own will, not to dominate, not to obey, but to create. This is Nietzsche's true vision of the will to power, not the tyranny of the strong over the weak, but the rising of the self over its own conditioning, a becoming so deep it terrifies the world that shaped you, becoming ungovernable from within. What does it mean to be ungovernable? It doesn't mean you break every law, fight every battle, reject every norm. It means you cannot be internally colonized. You think for yourself, even when the crowd screams otherwise. You act on your truth, even when it costs you. You no longer need permission to live with depth, with clarity, with edge. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is alignment. It is the refusal to be ruled by scripts you didn't write, because to be ungovernable from within is to become your own master, not of others, but of yourself. Living with radical authorship. Most people live by default. You are now invited to live by design. This means choosing your values, not the ones handed to you, but the ones forged through fire. This means owning your voice, not echoing opinions, but speaking from the raw interior of your experience. Nietzsche's overman is not an overlord. He is an artist of existence, someone who crafts life like a sculptor, cutting away what isn't real, shaping meaning from the void. And this authorship is not grand or loud. It is lived in each choice, what you say yes to, what you walk away from, what you build, even when no one understands it. Creating values. Instead of obeying them, you were taught to fit into values. Now you are called to create them. This is terrifying because there is no roadmap. But Nietzsche knew greatness is not inherited, it is invented. Ask yourself, what do I consider sacred? What is worth my time, my love, my suffering? What code will I write? Not from tradition, but from truth. You are no longer a product of culture. You are the culture in the making. Your integrity is no longer borrowed. It is original. This is not arrogance. It is the birthright of the conscious human soul. Building a life that resists control and radiates freedom. Your task now is to build a life that cannot be quietly controlled. A life rooted in clarity, not compliance, in fire, not fear, in meaning, not mimicry. This life will not be easy, but it will be real, and the world, though it may not applaud you, will feel your presence, not as noise, but as gravity. You will not need to convince anyone of your freedom. They will feel it, because power, when reclaimed, does not scream. It radiates. Step out of the script and create. The script you were given was never written for your soul. It was written for your obedience. Now you know, now you see. The question is, will you continue to perform, or will you step into the terrifying beauty of authorship? Reclaim your will. Speak the truth no one gave you permission to say. Love without asking how. Build without waiting for approval. You were not born to obey. You were born to become.